I remember how my mornings used to start, each day feeling familiar, wrapped in the comfort of routine. For years, I worked hard to build my career and home life, convinced the future was clear. But that August morning, while preparing for another business trip, I had no idea everything was about to change. My name is Trent Giroux, lead field engineer at a major construction firm. Although my work kept me busy and engaged, life was about to take an unexpected turn. That week was like any other. I had an early Tuesday flight, meaning I'd be leaving my Atlanta home before sunrise. Even with the early hour, knowing my wife Reagan would be waiting at home brought me peace. Our marriage, full of cherished moments, was my anchor, or so I thought. On a Monday in early August, work had me preparing for another trip. As a lead field engineer overseeing design build projects, travel was part of the job, and a 7:21 a.m. flight from Hartsfield-Jackson was no exception. With Atlanta's notorious traffic, I planned a 4 a.m. wake-up, so I left the office early to get home. "Reagan, I'm back," I called as I stepped into the kitchen. Her car was in the garage, but there was no response. Heading upstairs, I heard the shower running and walked in, stepping behind her. "You scared me," she laughed, turning and wrapping her arms around me. The warm water in the moment pushed work and upcoming challenges out of my mind. For a while, nothing else mattered. Reagan leaned against me, and as the steam swirled around us, we shared a moment that felt like a promise, a grounding reassurance before the coming storm we didn't see approaching. The job in Baton Rouge was as difficult as I expected, keeping me busy from Tuesday afternoon through Wednesday. I worked with Etherly, the on-site project manager, and hoped he learned something from the experience, though we planned to monitor him more closely. Wednesday afternoon, I drove to New Orleans for a meeting on our project there. Mary Jo Bilecki, whom I'd helped train, was now leading the project, but was set to go on maternity leave soon. To ensure a smooth transition, I was checking that everything was in order for her team. As expected, Mary Jo had things well managed, so after dinner with her and her husband Ozzy and a team meeting Thursday morning, I headed to Louis Armstrong Airport and made it back to Atlanta by early afternoon. I briefed my boss, Mr. Strickland, on Baton Rouge, and praised Mary Jo's work. He approved my recommendations and suggested I take the rest of the day off after submitting my expense report. After finishing the report, I reached for my phone to text Reagan that I'd be home early when my best friend and coworker, Ethan Gardner, walked in and shut the door. "Hey, Trent, how was the trip?" he asked. "Long but productive," I replied. "I'm exhausted, but Mr. Strickland told me to take the afternoon off. I'm heading home to surprise Reagan." Ethan's expression grew serious. "Trent, wait. This isn't about work. I'm really sorry, but I need to tell you something about Reagan. She's been unfaithful while you've been traveling." The shock and anger at Ethan's words hit me hard. I refused to believe it. Reagan had shared her wild past before we got serious, but she had committed to our life together. I glared at Ethan, dismissing his claim as absurd. "That's not true, Ethan. You've crossed a line. Get out and think about our friendship before coming back." He looked distressed. "I know it's hard to hear, but I trust the source. I wouldn't tell you if I didn't believe it was true." I cut him off, my anger boiling. "Not another word, Ethan. Leave now before I make you—" Ethan, much smaller than me, knew I could back up my threat. He looked defeated as he turned and left. Ethan looked at me, eyes full of pain. "Trent, I'm really sorry. We've been best friends forever, so you know I'd never hurt you on purpose. Not telling you would be worse in the long run. I know your temper, remember? I've calmed you down plenty of times, kept you out of trouble back in high school. I wouldn't tell you this if I didn't believe it. Here's the name of the investigator my cousin used when he suspected his wife was unfaithful. She's good. If she confirms it, you'll know it's the truth." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. Ethan was right. We'd been close since childhood. Him, the calm, smart one. Me, the fiery athlete. We'd gone through everything together, even worked at the same company for 6 years. Though I didn't believe his claim for a second, I realized he must have thought he was protecting me. "Your cousin's wife, was it true?" I asked. Ethan nodded. "Yeah, and Miss Hightower proved it. He divorced her, but they still swapped the kids. He'd do anything for them, though he hates her now. I'm really sorry, man." He left, closing the door behind him. Alone, I processed what he'd said, my thoughts shifting to his cousin's situation. I felt for the kids in that mess. Reagan and I had been talking about having children soon, hoping for a boy and a girl. The idea of betrayal felt impossible. I sat there, gathering myself before heading home. The accusation lingered, irritating and persistent. No, I didn't believe it, not for a second. But as I drove home, I decided not to mention it to Reagan. It was too outrageous to bring up without evidence and would only upset her. After a quick stop at the store, I arrived home. Reagan greeted me with excitement, rushing into my arms. "You're home early," I said, just before she kissed me deeply. "I planned to be here to welcome you," she said, eyes shining. "I missed you, Trent." In an instant, we were lost in each other, her warmth melting away the tension that had built since Ethan's visit. I needed to be close to my wife, to find comfort in her embrace. I gently pulled her up, and she understood, standing up and turning a chair around. She dropped her skirt, revealing she wasn't wearing anything underneath, and positioned herself over the chair, bracing on the table. "Be with me, Trent," she whispered. I pressed against her before moving closer. Her soft encouragement spurred me on as she found her own moment of bliss. Soon, I reached my peak as she trembled and relaxed, leaning against the chair. She caught her breath and left for the nearby bathroom, grinning as she went. Watching her, I felt reassured and thought about how false Ethan's claims were. Reagan loved me, and I knew she'd never betray me. I shook off his story and focused on the present. That evening, we shared an intimate moment, starting with gentle affection that built into deeper closeness. As Reagan drifted off to sleep with a peaceful smile, I lay awake, reflecting on what Ethan had said. Despite our long friendship, I knew he wouldn't have brought it up unless he truly believed it. Unable to focus on my book, my thoughts were consumed by the situation. With Reagan's affection fresh in my mind, I knew the accusations were baseless. I decided that to settle the matter, I needed to prove it false, for both my peace of mind and to preserve my friendship with Ethan. The next morning, I contacted Donna Hightower's office and booked an appointment for Monday afternoon. I kept a separate investment account for surprises and gifts, so I planned to use it to hire her without Reagan knowing. This way, the unfounded rumor would be put to rest. At my Monday appointment, I was greeted by Miss Hightower, a poised and sharp former APD officer. She projected confidence and took in every detail as we shook hands. "Good afternoon, Mr. Giroux." "How can I help you?" she asked, her keen eyes assessing me. "Thanks for seeing me, Miss Hightower. I'm Trent Giroux. I travel for work several times a month, and someone has spread a rumor that my wife is unfaithful. I need you to confirm she's been faithful, so I can put this to rest." She began asking questions without expression, and as I shared what I knew about the accusation and details about Reagan, I realized the issue might be more complex than I thought. Her questions were insightful, with follow-ups that helped clarify information, especially about Reagan's past. When she finally set down her pen, she said, "Thank you, Mr. Giroux. I see from your client sheet that you have engineering degrees from Georgia Tech. How familiar are you with philosophy or the burden of proof in the legal system?" I was caught off guard. "I took an intro philosophy course and have testified in a few cases, but I'm not deeply familiar." She nodded. "You're asking me to prove your wife hasn't been unfaithful. That's called proving a negative. While it's possible to prove certain negatives, like an intact wine glass that's never broken, proving continuous behavior over time is nearly impossible." She paused, then added, "For example, I could prove I didn't commit a crime yesterday with an alibi, but proving I didn't do something years ago is much harder. Applied to your case, we could monitor your wife for a week or month and provide evidence of her current behavior, but we can't guarantee what happened in the past. However, we might uncover evidence if there were past incidents. If you're okay with this, we'll take your case." Understanding her point, I agreed to hire Hightower Private Investigation Services. I spent a few more hours with an investigator going over details and planning for the right circumstances. Working from my Atlanta office all week, I set up a plan on Saturday night by tripping a circuit breaker in the basement. Sunday morning was normal, but after church and lunch with new friends, we returned home to find the upstairs warmer. Reagan immediately noticed, and I said I'd check the breaker. After flipping a few switches and returning upstairs, I said, "I didn't find anything wrong. I'll call the HVAC service." "Please do. It'll be too hot to sleep up there tonight." I called our HVAC company, navigating their automated system for a while before hanging up. Then I called the contact Donna Hightower provided. "Hi, this is Trent Giroux. Our upstairs AC isn't working. Can someone come out tomorrow at 10? Great. See you then." Reagan heard the end of the call and said, "It's too hot, so we're sleeping in the guest room tonight, like a hotel stay," she added with a grin. That night, we shared a close moment, and I felt reassured. There was no way Reagan's love for me could coexist with the rumors Ethan had mentioned. The next morning, Reagan asked me to dance the sheets for the laundry as I headed to the shower. I worked from home Monday morning and met the HVAC technician, a subcontractor from Hightower Private Investigation Services, at 10 as planned. I showed him around, then turned the circuit breaker back on. An hour later, he finished. These motion-activated cameras stay on for 5 minutes and are well hidden with wide-angle lenses. They'll capture clear footage, suitable for legal purposes, he said. He installed cameras in key areas, ensuring any activity would be recorded. I paid for the installation and 2-week rental before heading to work. When I returned home, the house was cool. "Reagan, I need to add a stop in Orlando to this week's trip," I said. I was already heading to Tampa on Tuesday, and now I'd return late Friday. "I'll try for an earlier flight, but it doesn't look promising." Reagan smiled. "I'll miss you, but let's make the most of tonight." She led me to the couch, and soon we were caught up in each other, laughing and sharing kisses. She straddled me, moving with confidence and passion, and I knew she was mine alone. Later, as she leaned into me and whispered, "I love you, Trent," I felt reassured. I replied, "I love you too," and meant it. She headed to the bathroom, and I quickly cleaned up, feeling grateful for what we shared. The Tampa meetings went well, and the Orlando issues were straightforward. My visit reinforced oversight and showed support for the team. After resolving everything, I stayed to review the site with the assistant project manager, noting he had potential for growth. Though I could have left Thursday, I stayed to allow time for the surveillance to continue. I worked in my hotel room, then visited a local shooting range, opting for pistol practice while other visitors indulged in flashier activities. On Friday, I worked at the job site until it was time to leave for the airport. Traffic on I-285 and I-75 was heavy, but I felt relieved when I finally reached my exit. Reagan greeted me with excitement, sensing my stress, and handing me a beer before we relaxed and talked on the couch. Later, she led me upstairs, and we shared a tender moment, making up for the days we had been apart. Saturday morning, Reagan went to the gym while I did yard work. Taking a break inside, I checked my email, relieved to find nothing from Donna Hightower's investigator. On Sunday, while Reagan was running errands, I checked again and found an unexpected email. "Dear Mr. Giroux, your order will be ready Monday at 11 a.m. Please contact our office to arrange delivery. Larson Toolworks." My hands trembled as I deleted the message. When Reagan returned home, she noticed my unease, and I claimed I wasn't feeling well. She hugged me and suggested I rest while she prepared dinner, but I couldn't shake my worry, noticing an unfamiliar floral scent in her hair. Unable to sleep well, I woke early Monday. The floral scent different from her usual products, and the email left me questioning everything. I rationalized it as just perfume from the store, but doubts remained. At 11 a.m., I arrived at Miss Hightower's office. She greeted me and said, "Mr. Giroux, we finished our investigation early, and I have bad news." She handed me a file. Skipping the report, I flipped straight to the photos. There was Reagan, with another man, in our bedroom. More photos followed, one showing them in the backseat of a car and another series outside a hotel. I noticed inconsistencies. "This man doesn't look like the first one," Miss Hightower explained. "We documented 4 encounters with 3 different men, ending with a repeat on Sunday at a private home." "Sunday?" "She said she was shopping," I muttered. "She did some shopping on Saturday after her second encounter, but only went to the grocery store on Sunday," she replied, suggesting I check receipts or credit card records. "She said she was at the gym Saturday," I said, still trying to process the news. "She was not at the gym," Miss Hightower said. "I'm sorry, Mr. Giroux. How could this happen? 3 different men in a week?" I said, anger overtaking disbelief. "I'm not a psychiatrist," Miss Hightower said gently, "but your wife might have a condition related to compulsive behavior. She seems to seek out these encounters, driven by a need beyond the norm and going to lengths to cover her tracks." "The flowers," I whispered, remembering the scent in Reagan's hair. "She must have showered after meeting him yesterday." "Maybe, or just a quick rinse or spritz," Miss Hightower said. "From our surveillance and video feeds, it's clear she's meticulous about hiding the evidence. She even changes the sheets after encounters. Many cheaters get caught by a telltale stain or scent." "In our bed?" I asked, recalling her changing the guest bed sheets after our recent night together. "Yes, 2 of the 3 nights you were gone. She brought him to your home," she continued. "Don't call them that, they're just cheaters." She nodded. "One of them is married. The second man is her regular partner, your wife's supervisor, Noah Woollever. He's 32, married, and recently became her manager. We identified him through surveillance and DMV records after seeing him leave your house." "That jerk," I muttered, recognizing his face in the file. "Reagan pointed him out once when I picked her up from work." "Not social with spouses, I bet," she said. "He met her at a bar Wednesday, came to your home, and then they met at a hotel Saturday and at his house on Sunday. If his wife had come home minutes earlier, Reagan's affair would have been exposed. Her game's already over, I said, bitterness in my voice. I was wild in my youth, but I wanted more and met Reagan when I was ready to settle down. She claimed she did too. Miss Hightower touched my hand. I'm sorry this turned out this way, but I must warn you. Don't let this pain push you to act out of character. Retaliation can ruin your life. Losing your job, facing jail, or worse. Don't let that be your story. Remember, this is her mistake, not yours. Her words sunk in as I nodded, gripping the reality of what lay ahead. My mind was racing with thoughts. The cheating was confirmed. Kids? Not now. Revenge? Maybe not, but payback? Absolutely. I resolved to stay calm and strategic, as calculated and relentless as Reagan had been in deceiving me. I wasn't the kind to hurt someone physically, but I would make sure she felt the pain she had caused. I'll be careful, Miss Hightower, but trust me, my soon-to-be ex-wife will feel the consequences, I said. She sighed, knowing she couldn't change my mind. Please remember, Trent, not to cross the line. The consequences could be severe. Miss Hightower referred me to George C. Godwin, a seasoned divorce attorney. We met after hours, and I spent time planning in Piedmont Park before meeting him. George was a jovial, experienced lawyer who knew the Georgia legal system well. He reviewed the file and flash drive I handed over, impressed by the thoroughness of Miss Hightower's work. I'll have everything ready by next Monday, he assured me, warning me to tread carefully as appearances matter in court. I returned home late Monday, citing exhaustion. Avoiding intimacy, I kept my distance from Reagan, though I agreed to a brief encounter that left me feeling detached. She laughed when things got messy, but it only reminded me of her betrayal. I showered, trying to wash away my disgust. Early Tuesday, I left quietly for my flight to Charlotte. On Thursday, I called Ethan. Ethan, you were right, I'm sorry, she played me. He forgave me instantly and offered his help. I delayed coming home Friday, claiming tiredness to avoid Reagan's advances. She attempted to entice me, but I declined, choosing instead to watch her, noting how her behavior seemed fit for a career in adult content. My anger and disgust kept me in control. Saturday, I visited my parents under the pretense of helping with a home project. I wanted to tell them everything, but knew it was best to wait until everything was finalized. The time for full disclosure would come soon enough. On Saturday afternoon, I called Reagan to say I wouldn't be home until Sunday, sensing she might not be alone. I kept my tone neutral, ending with a forced, love you. On Sunday, while she was out, likely seeing someone, Mr. Godwin texted to confirm that the papers would be served at 11 a.m. Monday, and I took a personal day. I left a note for Reagan about a work commitment and spent the evening at my office finalizing plans. Reagan called twice, and I assured her I'd be late, but promised an early return Monday afternoon to spend time together. Her mood brightened, and she told me she loved me. I knew it was a lie, but given her deceit, I thought, turnabout is fair play. When I slipped into bed late that night, she barely stirred. Monday morning took an unexpected turn when Reagan woke me with affection and climbed on top of me. God, Trent, I've needed this, she said, moving rhythmically. Pushing her off would ruin my plan, so I let her finish while holding back my own emotions. When I was close, I flipped her over and finished without fully engaging, feeling satisfaction mixed with pain. After she left for work, I marked my belongings with painter's tape. Items I owned before our marriage were clearly identified. Community property was left behind for the settlement or to donate. By 7:45, Ethan and movers arrived. Ethan took over while I packed the essentials. I'd already moved my tool-safe contents to my parents' house on Saturday. Amy, our neighbor and Reagan's friend, saw the moving truck and asked if we were moving. I intercepted her. Shh, I said with a smile. It's a surprise for our anniversary. New furniture. Please keep it quiet until Reagan mentions it. She agreed, and I was relieved. By 9 a.m., I was at the bank, withdrawing half of our joint funds as a cashier's check, which I deposited into a new credit union account. At 10:45, I parked in Sandy Springs and closed our joint credit card after ensuring a zero balance. Just as I finished at 10:57, a text confirmed the papers had been served at 11 a.m., right on schedule. Process server. Just asked for her. Receptionist said she's on her way. A minute later, another text came through. Process server. She's in the lobby now. Feeling nervous, I sent the prepared email to our friends and family, announcing the divorce and including photos showing Reagan and her boss, Noah, together. Heeding warnings from my attorney and Miss Hightower, the images were edited to blur explicit details while keeping their identities clear. Reagan and Noah weren't included in the message. They'd find out soon enough. I hit send, confirmed it went through, and put my laptop away. My phone rang at 11:03. It was Reagan. "Trent, what is this? Divorce? Why? I thought we were happy. Did you find someone else?" I laughed. "You thought we were happy?" "I did, until I discovered the truth. Check the back of the envelope from the attorney." I heard her panic, swearing and pleading over the phone. "It's not what it looks like, Trent." "Really? That's not your boss in our bed? We're done. Contact my attorney if you need anything." I hung up as she kept shouting, then blocked her number after receiving voicemails and texts filled with lies and excuses. I didn't listen, deleting everything without a second thought. Next, I called my father-in-law, Bob. "Hi, Bob. Sorry to call at work, but you need to hear this directly. Reagan has broken her vows, and I filed for divorce." "Trent, no. She's changed. You can't be serious." "I wouldn't do this lightly. She relapsed recently. I have proof, dates, times, photos, and videos." "It's over, Bob. I'm sorry, but the papers were served this morning." "I can't believe it. She promised she was past that." "She promised us all. If she'd stayed true, I'd have loved her forever. But it's too late now. I still care about you and Chessie, which is why I'm telling you directly." Bob expressed deep regret. We said goodbye, voices heavy with sadness. I left Chessie a voicemail knowing she'd soon hear the news from Bob. At 11:16 a.m., I faced the toughest part of my plan. Acting on it meant hurting someone who probably didn't deserve it, but avoiding it could lead to worse outcomes. Wearing sunglasses, a cap, and a fake delivery lanyard with Ethan's number, I headed inside. He was ready to answer as Sunshine Process Serving. At the security desk, I introduced myself and stated I had a package for Mrs. Melissa Woolaver. The guard initially directed me to receiving, but I insisted, quoting legal requirements for a personal signature. He relented after checking my ID, giving me a visitor's badge with strict instructions to return it. On the third floor, I repeated my routine at her firm's reception. The receptionist hesitated but called Mrs. Woolaver. I discarded my gum and cap before meeting her. Melissa, in her late 20s or early 30s, looked uneasy as she approached. "You have something for me to sign?" she asked. "No, but I need to give you this," I said quietly, handing her a photo showing her husband with my wife. "There's more proof in this envelope." Tears welled as she whispered, "This has to be fake. Noah promised." "It's real, Mrs. Woolaver. A private investigation confirmed it. The envelope contains documents, photos, and video all verified and legally obtained." She shook her head, crying. "He said it was a mistake before, that it wouldn't happen again. It wasn't just a moment of weakness this time. There are records of 3 meetings in 5 days. She clutched my shirt, processing the betrayal. Wiping her tears, she looked up. "Mr. Giroux, was it? Let's go somewhere. I want to send him a picture to show him." "Mrs. Woolaver, I appreciate the offer, but no," I said, holding her gently. "Acting in anger won't help. You need to think ahead and avoid decisions you'll regret. And you don't want to risk complications with the law." Melissa seemed to snap out of her grief, stepping back. "You're right. I gave him a chance, but this is it. We'll go to court, but I don't know how." I included the private investigator's contact info and a recommended attorney's name. He's been very responsive in my case and filed the papers today. She took the envelope, thanked me, and then asked, "Can I call you if I need advice? My number's inside." After visiting the testing lab recommended by Donna Hightower, I anxiously managed a project in South Georgia, worried about potential health risks. Thankfully, by week's end, the lab confirmed I was clear of any STDs. The relief helped calm some of my anger toward Reagan. Reagan continued to leave voicemails on both my work and personal phones, even using different numbers. I deleted them without listening. When I returned to the office on Friday, I found more messages waiting and decided to block her number permanently. I also visited my parents that weekend, where I blocked her number on their phone as well. My mom, emotional and hopeful, asked me to reconsider, but I showed her a dated photo. Tearfully, she finally understood. On Saturday, Andy Smith rushed into my office with news that Mary Jo Bilecki's water had broken early. Originally meant to take over her project after her leave, Andy was unprepared as his current project wasn't complete. After reviewing schedules, we proposed that I take over the New Orleans job, staying available for major issues on other projects, including Baton Rouge. That evening, we learned Mary Jo and her twins were stable. I drove to New Orleans, distancing myself from Reagan and focusing on work. Early the next day, I reviewed the project, met subcontractors, and planned ahead. I later visited Mary Jo at the hospital, bringing a note of thanks and a gift certificate for the twins in NICU. Seeing her joy made me reflect on the likelihood of not having children of my own, which stung. Work consumed me for days, and on Friday, I invited the construction office staff for drinks in the French Quarter. On Monday, George Godwin called with a divorce update, mentioning Reagan's increasingly frantic calls to his office. "Are you sure you don't want to talk to her?" he asked. I laughed dryly, hearing his chuckle on the line. I thanked him and returned to work. When I reached my hotel room that evening, there was a text from an unfamiliar number. "Hi, Trent. My attorney filed today and Noah has been served. Can we talk? Thanks, Melissa W." I replied to see if she was still awake, and my phone rang almost immediately. "Hi, Trent. Thanks for taking my call." "No problem, Melissa. How are things?" "Tough, but I'll manage. How about you?" "Similar. What's going on, Melissa?" I asked. After a pause, she said, "I wanted to thank you for exposing Noah's betrayal and for stopping me from making a mistake when I was vulnerable. You could have taken advantage, but you didn't. It made me realize how wrong it would have been. I appreciate it. This will be hard, but I'll get through it. Melissa, we were both in a difficult spot and it wouldn't have been right. I'm glad you're determined to move forward." "Still a long way to go, but it's better now," she said. I almost offered to be there if she needed to talk, but decided against it. Noah was her issue, not mine, and I had my own plans for dealing with him. We wished each other well and said goodbye. Work in New Orleans was going well, but I was also overseeing the Baton Rouge project, which kept me busy. Mr. Strickland's directives made it feel like I was constantly in over my head. George called a few weeks later with news. "Reagan's lawyer wants court-mandated counseling. If the judge approves, you'll need to attend sessions in Atlanta. What's your call?" Angry but prepared, I said, "We've kept some of the stronger evidence back. If the judge sees it, would it help?" "We'd share it with her attorney and it could make the judge quash the request," George said. "Warn the judge and do it," I replied. A week later, counseling was denied, though the judge suggested Reagan seek therapy for her issues. One problem was handled. During the months of legal battles, I kept a low profile and updated my will and life insurance to ensure Reagan received nothing if anything happened to me. I visited Mary Jo and Ozzy when their twins were out of the hospital, even babysitting one night, which left me hoping for only one child at a time if I ever had kids. Melissa checked in occasionally to ask about my case, indirectly seeking encouragement for her own. Due to legal concerns and personal morals, I kept our interactions strictly supportive. Eventually, her messages stopped as her case progressed. As Mary Jo's return approached, I found a home in Dunwoody, using pre-marriage funds for the down payment. After months at an extended stay hotel, I was ready for a more settled space and to get my belongings out of storage. Mary Jo resumed work, and the twins were thriving. As I handed the project back to her, I left New Orleans with a few lingering regrets. My first regret was that, with no upcoming projects in New Orleans, Mary Jo would be leaving the firm to be a stay-at-home mom. Ozzy secured a position as an associate professor at Loyola, which wasn't surprising. MJ asked me to keep her in mind for future work in the area, and I agreed. Second, returning to Atlanta meant saying goodbye to my unofficial godchildren and babysitting for MJ and Ozzy. I knew I'd miss the time spent with the twins, a painful reminder of my own childless state, thanks to Reagan's betrayal. Lastly, Reagan continued to fight over divorce details, dragging the process out. George assured me that Judge Johnson was losing patience and that it would end soon. Back in Atlanta, I moved into my new house and spent a week unpacking and meeting neighbors, including a friendly divorcee named Noelle. I thanked her for the brownies, but politely declined a dinner invitation to avoid any issues with the ongoing divorce. Ethan, who didn't understand the legal complications, asked when I'd start dating again. "When the judge finalizes the divorce, and I'm sure nothing jeopardizes the settlement," I said. "Still planning payback?" he asked. I nodded. "She'll get what she deserves when the time is right." Judge Johnson grew tired of Reagan's delays and summoned us both for final statements in early April. I arrived early, and Reagan approached me. "Trent, it didn't have to be this way." "It did, Reagan, because you broke our vows." "You were gone so much." "Don't use that excuse. You knew the travel involved when you married me, and I always made up for it. Not that it mattered when you slept with your boss and others during my last trip." Her face turned angry, tears streaming. "Trent, I had needs. I knew her history, always seeking pleasure like a fix, but I'd believed her promises to change. I gave you everything, including the best stimulator money could buy. You used to say I was the best ever before and after my trips." Realizing people were watching, she said, "Can we talk privately?" "No, we discussed this before marriage. You said your wild days were over. You failed at marriage and everything else. If you can't accept that, maybe a new therapist can help more than the last." Her face fell as more people watched. I walked away when George arrived, leaving her in tears. Inside the courtroom, Judge Johnson ensured we signed the paperwork to prevent further delays. Reagan erupted into an outburst, but was silenced by the judge, who then finalized the proceedings. The gavel fell, ending our 5-year marriage. I thanked George after Judge Johnson left the courtroom. As I turned to go, Reagan approached, pleading. Ignoring her, I kept walking, and her tone turned angry, shouting obscenities. Despite knowing better, she lost control. I didn't see if she was arrested as George and I quietly left. We had already had our conversation, and I had no interest in speaking to her again. The next day, George filed for a restraining order, which Judge Johnson approved. This ensured Reagan stayed out of my life. If she violated it, a brief jail stay might have taught her a lesson, but she stayed away, and I began to move on. That weekend, I called Noelle to redeem our rain check. Although we had a fun evening, it was clear we didn't share much beyond attraction. We spent the night together, but she confirmed she wasn't looking for anything serious. We parted as friendly neighbors. I dated others in the weeks that followed, but despite the moments of fun, I realized I was still searching for a meaningful connection, a partner for life. By Independence Day, visiting my parents and seeing my sister's family made me reflect. My mom, perceptive as ever, gently reminded me that I needed to find someone serious if I wanted a family. In late July, I got a text from Melissa Wooliver, which surprised me. After finishing some chores, I replied, and she called shortly after. "Hi, Trent. Thanks for taking my call." "No problem, Melissa. How have you been?" "It's been a while, and I wasn't sure you'd want to talk after everything." I chuckled. "Unless you were involved with my ex-wife and your husband." "Ex-husband as of today," she interrupted. "Then I don't blame you for their mess. So what's up?" "I am officially free now and wanted to thank you. You exposed the truth and gave me advice that saved me time and money. I didn't use your lawyer, but your help meant a lot. Glad I could help. Don't worry about it. It's hard not to, Trent. You were an inspiration when I was at my lowest. I don't know you well, but I appreciate what I've seen. Would you like to have dinner with me?" Dinner with Melissa was lovely, but my focus wasn't on the food. It was on her. She was sweet and beautiful, and I couldn't help but think how foolish her ex-husband had been. Reagan had once been stunning too, but her betrayal had erased any of that appeal for me. "You're staring," Melissa said with a grin. I laughed. "It's easy when you're looking at someone worth it." She blushed and asked, "Want to get out of here and go to my place?" "I'd like that." We left the restaurant, and as soon as we reached my SUV, Melissa pulled me close, kissing me deeply. Her touch made my intentions clear. "Please, Trent, get me home," she whispered urgently. I parked in her garage, and we barely made it inside before we were kissing again. Melissa tugged at my belt, and I suggested, "Inside?" "Yes, inside. I need you now," she moaned. I carried her in, and she led me to her room while we kept kissing. Clothes came off quickly. I kissed her soft skin, which made her cry out in pleasure. As we continued, she climaxed, moaning with her dress pulled up and my pants unzipped. I teased her a bit before finally pulling them down, and she kicked them away. She helped lower my boxer briefs, and my arousal was clear. She took a protection from me, rolled it on, and lay back with anticipation. Positioning myself over her, I slid inside slowly. Melissa moaned, "Now, Trent, make love to me," and I did, savoring every moment. Our first time together was slow and rhythmic. I watched Melissa's face, seeing her anticipation and focus as we moved in sync. Her arms and legs wrapped around me, urging me deeper. Her moans matched our movements, growing faster as her climax neared. I felt my own build, intensifying as we reached the edge. She fought it, eyes shut tight, until she finally let go with a groan. Her release triggered mine, and I finished with her, as her body quivered. I leaned over her, careful not to press down too much. We exchanged a soft kiss, and when our eyes met, her smile was full of joy and contentment. "Trent, I've wanted this since the day you first came to my office. It was even better than I imagined," she said. Her words made the moment even sweeter. I realized I needed to take care of the protection before any risk arose. "You're amazing," I whispered, "but I need to take care of this." She nodded, smiling as I got up. Moments later, she was heading to the bathroom, her toned body highlighted by the soft light. We stayed in bed that night, pausing only for water or quick trips to the bathroom. We made love 2 more times before falling asleep, and again in the morning. Thankfully, it was Saturday, and I had no work obligations. Melissa, so reserved in daily life, had been both fierce and tender in bed. After our morning session, she dozed off, and I slipped out to the bathroom. Morning light illuminated the room, letting me take in the scattered clothes and the queen bed surrounded by pillows we'd knocked to the floor. I picked one up, smiling at how we'd used them during the night. As I glanced at her dresser, a series of photos caught my eye. One image made me pause, so I picked it up. "Trent, what are you doing?" Melissa asked from the bed. "Who's the little girl in these pictures?" I asked. "That's my daughter, Ansley. She's 3 and means everything to me." "You never mentioned her," I said, surprised. "I kept her out of the mess with Noah to protect her. She was the main issue in the divorce, which is why it took so long. I don't want you to meet her unless we're serious. Where is she now?" I tried to keep my voice steady. "She's with him this weekend." "Why? Is something wrong?" "I like you, Melissa. I really do, more than I should for how long we've known each other. But your ex-husband is one of the few people I dislike as much as my ex-wife. If we get serious, I'd want to be part of your daughter's life. But who else would be there at her events?" "Noah," she whispered, understanding. "He's awful, but he does love her." "Exactly. Every time I see him at any event for Ansley, it will remind me of what he did with my ex and how he contributed to my marriage ending. I'd resent him, and Ansley, even if she didn't understand, would feel that tension. She'd eventually come to resent me, damaging any bond we could have and, in turn, hurting our relationship. It pains me to say this, but it would eventually break us apart." Melissa sat up, clutching the sheet, and whispered, "So, there's no future for us." As much as I wish I could be proven wrong, "No, I don't think there is," I said. Tears fell as she nodded. "I thought this was too perfect. Now I know it was. Please, Trent, just go." She touched her phone, adding, "The garage door is open." She lay back, crying as I grabbed my clothes and dressed in the hallway, hating myself as much as her ex. It hurt, but I knew it was true. I visited my parents that day, giving them a brief, edited version. They saw I was hurting more than I let on. Mom, ever supportive, hugged me and assured me things would be okay, though I struggled to believe it. On Sunday after church, we met my sister and her family for lunch. While waiting for a table, she pulled me aside and made me talk. I shared most of it, leaving out the intimate details. "That's tough," she said, "but you won't know if it could work unless you try. One date isn't enough to judge. If you continue, you might find it's worth the fight." "Thanks, sis, you're right, but that one date was enough to show me how painful it could be if it failed. Little brother, you won't know unless you try." I agreed to think about it. We didn't discuss it further, but it stayed with me. Ethan, who understood me well, supported my decision, but on the drive back from a plant site in LaGrange, I questioned whether his agreement was wise, given his track record with relationships. He set us up with 2 women the next weekend, and while it was fun, I pushed the thoughts aside. During the divorce, Reagan wanted to keep our house, but I had George push for a sale, since she couldn't afford the buyout without giving up other assets. It was a bit harsh, but I felt it was justified and didn't lose sleep over it. George also handled the house sale. He learned Reagan was buying a condo, and soon after, I heard rumors that she and Noah were getting married. I called George since it would affect my finances. He had argued against support during the divorce since Reagan was at fault, but the judge still awarded her a small amount for 5 years, or until she remarried. "I'll check into it and let you know. If it's true, we'll stop the payments," George said. "Yeah, and if it's true, some people never learn," I said, realizing how their marriage validated my decision about Melissa. "Nope," George chuckled. "That's what keeps me in business." And I thought, maybe it opened up an option I had considered early in my divorce, but never thought would happen. When I heard about their marriage, I reached out to a friend at Reagan's firm. Will Kleiner and I had been college acquaintances and reconnected when I started dating Reagan, discovering he worked in a different department there. Reagan and I had spent time with Will and his wife while dating and early in our marriage, but we hadn't seen each other since before the divorce. We arranged a lunch when I was not traveling. After I explained what happened, Will said, "That's terrible. I'm sorry, Trent. I did hear that Wolliver requested a department transfer. Now it makes sense. They're trying to avoid any HR conflicts. Does your firm have an official policy about that?" "Definitely. Violating it can mean serious trouble for the employees and the firm." "Will, could you get me a copy of that HR section?" "I can, but don't tell anyone where you got it." That Saturday, I met Will and his wife Lori at a Braves game, and he passed me a flash drive. A few days later, I discussed it with George. "Trent, I'm sorry. Even if their policy is clear, state law doesn't let you sue over this. Georgia got rid of alienation of affection laws in 1979 to decriminalize consensual relationships. That means one spouse can't sue a third party for luring the other away, including their employer," George explained, laughing at his own phrasing about Noah's behavior. "Damn," I said. I wasn't after money, but I hoped hitting the firm financially would force them to punish Noah, and maybe Reagan. George smiled. "A lot of potential plaintiffs feel the same. The only exception is if the firm was formally informed and ignored it. Even then, the chances of winning are so low that most lawyers wouldn't touch it." I sighed, repeating, "Damn." He laughed. "Don't lose hope. Let's handle the spousal support first, and we can explore other options down the line. The next week, George was at the courthouse filing a new motion. With proof of Reagan and Noah's marriage license, George requested the termination of spousal support, arguing that it was no longer justified per the divorce agreement. Reagan's lawyer strongly opposed the motion, and we suspected that the license had been filed far from Atlanta to keep us from discovering it and filing this exact motion. Judge Johnson sided with us, dismissing Reagan's objections, and I was finally free from the monthly payments that had irked me since they were imposed. When I brought up another matter, George shook his head and said, "Patience, Trent, patience." 6 months later, George called and we met for lunch. "Trent, I advised patience because newlyweds need time to settle in, especially with Noah moving departments within the same firm. He would be cautious for a while, getting comfortable before seeking a new target. From what you've told me, and from past experience, now might be the right time to check up on him." 2 weeks later, Donna Hightower and her investigator confirmed that serial cheaters don't change. Noah was involved with a new subordinate. George compiled the evidence and handed it to one of his attorney friends. "We need to keep your involvement hidden, Trent. If the new judge overseeing Reagan's case discovered that your actions impacted her husband's job, she might request the reinstatement of spousal support. I doubt she'll find out from me, and I don't think Noah will tell her why if anything happens," I said. George grinned and wagged a finger. Smart thinking and true. George's attorney contact delivered the file to Noah's firm. Will later informed me that Noah was escorted out by security, and the word was that he wouldn't return. Reagan reportedly cried when she found out, but was left without answers. "Serves him right," I said after the call ended. "If I keep this up, I risk becoming a bitter old man." Smiling to myself, I decided it was a risk worth taking. Wanting to keep my name out of it in case Reagan found out and tried to reinstate spousal support, I sent an anonymous package overnight. The next evening, Melissa Ortiz called me. "Trent," she said, "I know you might not want to hear from me, but I had to call. Noah told me he was laid off due to corporate cutbacks and that he'd be filing to reduce alimony. But I reached out to a friend at the firm and heard the rumor. He was fired. Today I received an anonymous express package that explains it and should help the judge maintain my spousal support when Noah files his request. Trent, I think I know who to thank. So to that person, I say, thank you." I laughed. Well, if you were to ask the right person, he'd say, "You're welcome," even if he couldn't admit it. And as for the package, some people never change, right? I'm sure Noah will try to play the victim when he goes before the judge. But when my lawyer presents this, I hope the judge throws it right back at him. It's ridiculous. He just got remarried. I wonder if he started cheating that fast with me too. Don't dwell on that, Melissa. It's in the past. Focus on your future and be happy. You deserve it. We said our goodbyes, and I had a feeling it would be our last conversation. I felt an unexpected lightness. For the first time in what seemed like forever, I felt truly free. I had weathered the storm, retaliated as much as I dared, and gave back the turmoil Reagan and Noah caused me without crossing the line. Reagan was likely in a tougher spot now, living in a condo instead of a nice house, with an unemployed husband paying hefty alimony and child support. And she was probably being cheated on, just as she had once betrayed me. I didn't tell her. It mirrored her silence about her infidelity. I had tried to provide the best for her, but now I suspected she had more to worry about than ever before. I'd struck back at them both and felt no regrets. Not a single one. Thinking it through, I realized I no longer used the insults that once filled my mind. The vengeance was done, and I no longer needed to think about them or care about their thoughts. That understanding brought the biggest smile of all. The smile didn't last, because, in the weeks that followed, I made one final, difficult realization. Even after feeling I had balanced the scales with Reagan and Noah, I discovered they still had a hold over me. When I had the opportunity for happiness with Melissa, I had walked away, haunted by memories of what my ex and her ex had done and the embarrassment we both faced. I had been on numerous dates and had casual relationships since then, but it became increasingly clear that I didn't truly care about any of it once the momentary thrill was gone. I realized Melissa still occupied my thoughts as much as Reagan and Noah did. While I had sought revenge and felt some satisfaction, I wasn't truly free as long as I cared about their opinions or reactions. True freedom would come when I could look at them and think, look at what you lost and what I might gain because of it. Thank you for being so foolish. With this clarity, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my recent calls until I found the number Melissa had used when she called after receiving the package about Noah's infidelity. I pressed the call button, hoping she would answer. Moments later, she did. "Hi, Melissa, it's Trent Giroux. Do you have a moment to talk?" "Trent, you helped me recently when you didn't have to. I'm listening. I had an epiphany tonight, and if I'm not too late, I'd like to talk with you and see if I have a chance to make things right." There was silence on the line, though I could hear her breathing, so I continued. "I've realized that while I advised you to let go of the past, I haven't been following my own advice. I was so consumed with what happened and how it destroyed my life that I failed to look forward. I want to apologize for that, and if you're willing, I'd like to try to make things right with you." She stayed silent as I continued, and I could almost imagine Melissa nodding in understanding on the other end of the line. To my relief, she wasn't seeing anyone, and to my surprise, she agreed to give us another chance, taking things slowly to see where they might lead. The following weekend, we had our second first date with clear intentions to go slow, though sometimes life has its own plans. When I walked her to her door, she invited me in. We poured wine and talked on her couch until past 11. As I mentioned it was getting late, our goodnight kiss lingered longer than expected. Despite our plans, it became clear that the attraction between us was strong. Smiling, she lay against me, touching me and whispering, "If you don't mind forgetting that slow talk, neither will I if we go to my bedroom." We laughed as I carried her upstairs and gently placed her by the bed. We undressed each other, and I eased her onto the sheets. She kissed me softly, handed me a protection, and then climbed on top of me. Our kisses deepened, shifting from her lips to her neck, shoulders, and her soft chest. Each movement brought me closer, and when I arched up on her next slide, she smiled as I entered her. We moved slowly, letting the moment build as our bodies connected, with the rhythm of our breathing and her soft moans as the soundtrack. Watching the sweat form on her brow from effort and focus made me smile, grateful that we had found each other again and were taking this second chance despite my earlier stubbornness. When Melissa began to tire, I felt her weight shift onto me, so I gently rolled her over and took the lead. We continued our lovemaking, gradually increasing the pace as her moans grew shorter and quicker. We reached a crescendo together, with her head arching back as she climaxed, and I felt my own release, seeing stars as I came. Afterward, we lay in silence, holding each other. It was early in our renewed relationship, just the first date, but in my heart I wished for more, and from the way she looked at me, I sensed she might feel the same. After some time and a bit of cleanup, we returned to bed, holding each other close. Melissa rested partly on my chest, meeting my eyes. "Trent, you don't have to go. You can stay, if you'd like." I smiled at her, then leaned in for a kiss. I'd like that a lot. Though we faced some challenges in the following months, we realized we shared values on the most important things, and the minor differences didn't matter when there was mutual affection. What I felt for her after that second date deepened over time, and I soon admitted to myself that it had been more than just like from the start. Melissa came to the same realization, and we began making plans for our future. We married a little over a year after rekindling our relationship, with little Ansley as our flower girl. When Melissa and I said our vows, we meant them. We did run into Noah a few times, but it didn't play out as I once feared. The first time, he tried to make a sly comment about taking seconds, but I stopped him. In a quiet voice just for him, I said, "Noah, thank you for taking Reagan, the cheating liar, off my hands. If you think she'll be more loyal to you than she was to me, you're even more foolish than I thought. And thank you for giving me the chance to be with Melissa, a woman worth everything you failed to appreciate. Trust me, I got the better end of the deal." He almost choked on his words, clenching his fists in frustration, before realizing that any attempt to hit me would only result in him getting hurt. Recognizing this just in time and sparing both himself and Ansley from a scene, he turned away and went back to his daughter. He lifted her up, kissed her, whispered something, then set her down and told Melissa goodnight. A few months later, he mentioned to her that he was in the middle of a divorce from Reagan, and finally understood that what I had said was true. When he tried to bring up the past, Melissa shut him down firmly. "It's unfortunate you realized that too late, Noah. Don't bring it up again." Since then, whenever we've crossed paths, Noah has remained silent on the topic, though I sometimes see a hint of regret in his eyes when he sees us together. And I always smile, present day. Ansley is now 6 and spending time at her Ortiz grandparents' house while I hold Melissa's hand, feeling her squeeze it tightly as she pushes with all her strength. The doctor gives the final order, and Melissa lets out one last push. Exhausted, she leans back, and I kiss her forehead as the doctor and nurse work at the foot of the bed. The obstetrician looks up moments later and beams at us. Mr. and Mrs. Giroux, congratulations. You have a beautiful baby boy. At that moment, all the challenges and hardships we faced to reach this point felt worthwhile. I realized that, despite everything, I wouldn't change a thing.